The planet Velcros burned beneath the cruel light of 1,000 distant suns. Its cities, once shining with silver towers and glowing streets, now lay in smoldering ruins. Smoke coiled into the sky, carrying with it the cries of the desperate and the mourning of those who had lost everything. The ground shook as enormous alien warships hovered above, their shadows blotting out the sun, and with every moment, more destruction rained down. The Korvath had come. Towering insectoid warriors with jagged exoskeletons, they moved like a single unstoppable tide. Their ships were massive, bristling with weapons that reduced entire districts to ash in minutes. Velcros had fought before, but never like this. Never against a force that seemed to consume hope as easily as it consumed buildings. In the midst of the chaos, Commander Lyra Tan moved with quiet determination. Her uniform was scorched, her hair streaked with soot, but her eyes burned with the stubborn light of someone unwilling to surrender. She had watched her friends fall, soldiers she had trained and laughed with, all taken down by the Korvath's merciless assault. But she refused to break. From the last standing communications tower, she transmitted a message into the endless void of space. Her hands shook, her voice cracked once, then she steadied herself. "This is Velcros," she said. "We are under siege by the Korvath. Our people are dying. If there is any civilization out there that values life, if there is anyone who can help, please answer us. We have no time left." The signal carried across light years, a tiny thread of hope in a galaxy that had grown indifferent. Lyra sent the message over and over, each repetition more desperate than the last. Somewhere she thought someone must hear, someone must care. Back on the surface, families hid in the ruins. Children clutched their parents, eyes wide and full of terror. Mothers and fathers whispered promises they were not sure they could keep, while soldiers did their best to hold back the advancing Korvath. But each day the aliens came closer. Each day Velcros seemed to inch closer to annihilation. Lyra moved from group to group, encouraging, shouting orders, comforting where she could. "Stay together. Protect the children. We will not let them take our home without a fight," she said, though her words often felt hollow. The Korvath were relentless, and hope was a fragile thing. In the sky above, alien dread cruisers glinted in the sunlight. Their massive shapes blocked out the horizon, and with each passing moment more bombers dropped from their hulls, raining destruction. The sound was deafening, a constant roar of metal tearing and buildings collapsing. People screamed. Dogs barked and ran in panic. It was a sound Velcros would never forget. Yet even in the darkest hour, a small flicker of courage persisted. Soldiers made last-ditch stands in the streets. Engineers rigged abandoned buildings to collapse on enemy forces. And somewhere in the wreckage of the capital city, children played a dangerous game of hiding from creatures they barely understood, guided only by the instinct to survive. Lyra returned to the communications tower again and again. Every time she sent the message. Every time she hoped that someone, anyone, was listening. "If you can hear this," she repeated over the comms, her voice trembling now. "We are Velcros. We are dying. Please, come to us. Do not let us fall alone." Hours passed. The Korvath tightened their grip. Entire neighborhoods were gone. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning metal. Some soldiers began to whisper that no one would come, that Velcros was truly alone in the universe. But Lyra refused to believe it. She refused to let despair win. Then came the first flicker of the impossible. Far beyond the reaches of Velcros' atmosphere, tiny lights appeared. At first they were faint, almost indistinguishable from the stars. But they moved. They were growing, speeding toward Velcros at unimaginable speed. The soldiers who saw them stopped mid-fight, eyes wide with disbelief. Lyra's heart leapt. Could it be? Could someone have answered their call? Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the comms, sending one last plea. "Help is coming. Please help us survive. We are ready to fight, but we cannot do this alone." The lights in the distance multiplied. Ships unlike any Velcros had seen before tore through space, engines blazing like the fires of the suns themselves. They were massive, armored, and built for war, but something in their movements was controlled, deliberate, almost surgical. Whoever they were coming for them, and they came fast. Children clung to their parents, soldiers froze in the streets, and Lyra felt a mixture of awe, fear, and hope that she had not felt in weeks. Maybe, just maybe, Velcros was not alone. Maybe someone had heard the silent plea and chosen to answer. Not tomorrow, not when it was convenient, but now. Somewhere in the vast emptiness, The Deathworlders were awake. The message from Velcros had reached ears hardened by survival on planets no one else would dare to inhabit. They did not wait for permission. They did not negotiate. They came because survival demanded action, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the people of Velcros felt the stirrings of hope. Hope that someone somewhere in the galaxy would answer the call before it was too late. Lyra clenched her fists and looked to the horizon. The distant lights grew brighter. She whispered under her breath, almost to herself, "Hold on. Help is coming. We are not alone." The war had not yet been won, but for the first time Velcros knew that salvation was not a dream. It was real, and it was coming faster than anyone could have imagined. Far beyond the civilized systems in the dark reaches of space where no map dared to reach, lay Krathis 9, a planet forged in fire and storms. Its surface was jagged with black rock, rivers of molten lava, and winds so violent they could tear trees from the ground before they grew more than a few feet tall. Life here was brutal, unforgiving, and only the strongest survived. Its people, humans, like Lyra's own but different, were shaped by hardship, honed by danger, and tempered by death itself. Among the jagged cliffs and erupting volcanoes, a fleet stirred. Ships that looked more like beasts than vessels of war shuddered to life. Engines roared, releasing plumes of molten energy into the sky. Smoke twisted and danced, mingling with sparks from distant geysers. Soldiers trained in gravity fields harsher than Velcros' own atmosphere ran drills across the planet's crust. Moving with precision, their muscles and minds tuned to survive anything the galaxy could throw at them. Captain Jarek Hallow stood on the observation deck of the largest flagship, his eyes scanning the stars. He was a man of few words, and his face bore scars from 100 battles. Every line, every cut told the story of a life lived at the edge of death. His crew waited, silent, trusting him without question. And Jarek had received a message, a faint signal, a plea for help from a distant planet called Velcros. He did not hesitate. Hesitation was a luxury Deathworlders could not afford. "Prepare for launch," he said in his low, gravelly voice. It carried the weight of command and the certainty of action. "We are going to Velcros. Nothing will stop us." The crew moved like a single organism. Weapon systems hummed, shields charged, and every fighter and bomber was fueled and armed. The Deathworlders did not argue. They did not ask why. Their planet had taught them that survival was absolute. When someone cried for help, the answer was action, not diplomacy, not debate. In the fleet's central command, tactical officers coordinated. Star charts blinked with enemy positions, showing the Korvath armada already approaching Velcros. "They have fortified their attack," said Lieutenant Mira Talon, her eyes scanning the holographic displays. "But our fleet can outrun them. Our strike will reach Velcros before the Korvath can crush it completely." Jarek nodded once. "Good, we do not negotiate. We do not wait for permission. We strike, we survive, and we save those who cannot save themselves." His words were sharp, precise, a promise forged from countless years of hardship. Below, soldiers suited in reinforced exosuits prepared for the horrors they might face. These were humans who had survived deserts of acid, jungles where every plant tried to kill them, and oceans that could drown even the strongest swimmer. Velcros would see them and think them monsters, but in truth, they were simply humans who had learned to fight when death was constant. As the fleet lifted from Krathis 9, the planet shook beneath the weight of engines and the roaring ascent of massive warships. Lava geysers exploded beneath the departing vessels, sending plumes of fire into the air. And as they left the planet, Jarek watched the horizon, thinking of Velcros and the people who had cried out into the void. "They are weak," he muttered to himself, "but they deserve survival, and we will give it to them." The journey through uncharted space was long, but the Deathworlders did not waste time. Ships traveled at speeds that ordinary navies could not match. Fighters darted between massive dreadnoughts with surgical precision, training and instinct working together in deadly harmony. Every man and woman aboard knew their role, knew the consequences of failure, and accepted them without fear. And yet, there was a quiet intensity to them that even Jarek admired. They were humans, yes, but not like any humans the galaxy knew. They had been forged by death, tempered by survival, and honed to perfection. Their loyalty to one another was absolute, their courage unwavering, and their hearts, though hardened by endless struggle, carried a spark of something rare, hope for those who could not save themselves. As they approached Velcros, sensors detected the Korvath fleet already tearing through cities below. Dreadnoughts blotted out the sun, bombers screamed through the skies, and the ground shook with the force of bombardment. The Velcros defenders were exhausted, their morale at its lowest point. Jarek's voice cut across the fleet. "Formation Delta. Strike the lead cruisers first. Leave nothing standing that threatens the civilians below." And they did. Ships dove through space like lightning, plasma cannons opening fire with deadly accuracy. Korvath shields flared and popped. Dreadnoughts shredded in moments. Fighters swarmed, cutting through alien bombers like scythes through wheat. Every maneuver was calculated, precise, and relentless. Lyra Tan on Velcros first saw them as tiny sparks in the sky. Then, one by one, they grew into massive shapes, engines burning brightly as they tore through the void. Hope struck her like lightning. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe. Somewhere in the distance, Jarek watched the planet below. Cities burned, yes, but not for long. He would see to that. His people had answered the call. The Deathworlders did not wait. They did not hesitate, and Velcros would survive because of it. For the first time, in a galaxy that had learned to ignore cries for help, a world saw that some humans, would answer before anyone else. And the Deathworlders were just beginning, living predators across the horizon. Fire rained down from above, turning streets into rivers of molten metal. Buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled in seconds. The screams of the terrified echoed between the ruins, a chilling symphony of fear. On the ground, Commander Lyra Tan ran through the streets, dodging debris and falling sparks. Her uniform was scorched, her boots caked in ash, but she refused to stop. Around her, soldiers struggled to maintain the line against the Korvath assault, their weapons barely scratching the enemy's armored shells. Civilians fled in panic, clutching children and whatever belongings they could carry. "Hold the line," Lyra shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Do not let them take another block. Protect the civilians." But the Korvath moved with terrifying precision. Their exoskeletons glimmered under the firelight as they marched through the streets like unstoppable machines. Every time a soldier fired, they dodged or shrugged off the attack. Every barricade collapsed under their relentless assault. Velcros was on the brink of falling completely, and yet hope had already begun to arrive. Far above the atmosphere, the lights of the Deathworlder fleet pierced the smoky skies. At first, the defenders could hardly believe it. The tiny points of light grew larger, faster, closer. Massive ships descended from orbit with engines blazing, sending shockwaves through the air that rattled even the Korvath forces. Lyra's heart leapt. She ran to a hilltop overlooking the city and gasped as she saw the shapes of ships unlike anything she had ever imagined. These were not just warships. They were living extensions of their crews, massive, armored, and deadly precise. And they were coming for the Korvath. The first volleys of Deathworlder weapons struck the alien fleet like bolts of pure lightning. Plasma cannons carved through dreadnoughts, ripping them apart in seconds. Fighters swarmed through the skies, weaving between enemy ships with impossible speed. Explosions erupted in space and on the planet, and the Korvath faltered for the first time. On the ground, the Velcros defenders felt a surge of courage. Seeing the Deathworlders arrive, seeing someone answer their desperate plea, sparked a flame within them. Soldiers raised their weapons with renewed determination. Civilians hid behind debris but dared to hope. Lyra shouted orders, coordinating with the remaining defenders as the alien tide wavered. "Focus on the southern flank," she yelled. "Keep them away from the children's shelters. We can hold." The Korvath, taken aback by the sudden arrival of a fleet they had not anticipated, faltered in their assault. Their formations broke as the Deathworlders attacked with surgical precision. The aliens were trained to dominate through sheer numbers, but the humans from Krathis 9 had something far more dangerous: strategy, speed, and unyielding will. Captain Jarek Hallow stood on the bridge of his flagship, eyes scanning the battlefield below. "Strike hard. Strike fast. Leave nothing standing," he commanded. His voice carried through the fleet, calm and deadly. Every Deathworlder crew member knew their task. Every move was executed without hesitation. The Korvath flagship erupted in flames as a concentrated salvo from the Deathworlders struck its hull. Smaller ships swirled around it in frantic chaos, unable to regroup. From Velcros below, civilians watched as their oppressors' fear became visible. These towering monsters who had dominated countless worlds were now faltering. Amidst the fighting, Lyra noticed a small group of children trapped in the ruins of a library. Smoke filled the air, and falling debris threatened to bury them alive. Without thinking, she dashed forward, pulling them from the wreckage and carrying them to safety. Behind her, soldiers covered her advance, inspired by her courage. Above them, Deathworlder fighters engaged Korvath bombers in a deadly dance. Explosions lit the sky like fireworks, but these were not for celebration. They were the marks of war, precise and brutal. The Deathworlders moved as one, their teamwork flawless, their determination unbreakable. Every Korvath strike that had seemed unstoppable moments ago now faltered under the relentless assault. In the heart of the city, Lyra allowed herself a fleeting glance upward. Massive human ships tore through the alien armada, their engines blazing like the fury of 1,000 suns, and for the first time in weeks she felt a deep, overwhelming hope. They might survive this. They might live to see another sunrise. The Korvath tried to regroup, but their confidence was gone. Panic spread among their forces. Where once they had moved with the certainty of domination, now they hesitated, confused and frightened. They had underestimated these humans, these Deathworlders who had answered the call when no one else would. Lyra's soldiers pressed forward, rallying behind the newcomers. Civilians found courage they didn't know they had, helping where they could. Streets that had been battlegrounds became lines of resistance, with Deathworlders coordinating strikes from above, guiding the defenders with perfect precision. And through it all, Lyra felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope that was real, fierce, and alive. The Korvath advance was still dangerous and the city was not yet safe. But for the first time, Velkros knew that someone beyond their understanding, had come to fight for them. Somewhere in the dark reaches of space, Captain Jarek and his crew watched, ready to strike again. The war was far from over, but the first blow had been struck. The Korvath would learn in the most brutal way possible that Velkros was no longer alone, and humanity, in the form of Deathworlders, had already shown its teeth. The sky above Velkros was alive with fire and steel. The Korvath, once confident and unyielding, now moved with hesitation, their dreadnoughts faltering under the relentless assault of the Deathworlders. Explosions ripped through their ships like violent storms, sending pieces of alien metal raining down onto the streets below. Commander Lyra Tan stood on the shattered balcony of the capital's city hall, her hands gripping the scorched railing. Her eyes followed the massive shapes of Deathworlder ships slicing through the sky. Each volley of plasma fire, each calculated strike, brought a surge of hope she hadn't felt in weeks. They were more than reinforcements, they were a force of nature, precise, merciless, and unstoppable. Below, the Korvath soldiers tried to regroup. Their ground forces moved in jagged formations, attempting to crush the defenders who had suddenly regained courage. They fired their energy cannons, leapt from rooftops, and tried to push Velkros's remaining forces into submission. But every attack was met with human precision and fury. From orbit, the Deathworlders coordinated with the defenders. Fighters swooped down like hunting birds, striking Korvath war machines with pinpoint accuracy. Bombs carved through alien ranks, explosions synchronized with the defenders' counterattacks. Velkros's soldiers, inspired by the sight above, pushed forward. The first real smiles in weeks appeared on tired, soot-streaked faces. Captain Jarek Hallow watched from the bridge of his flagship, eyes narrowed and sharp. "Strike the flank near the river delta," he commanded. "Korvath reinforcements are concentrating there. Flatten them. Leave nothing standing that threatens the civilians." His voice carried the authority of a man who had survived worlds where death was the only constant. His crew obeyed instantly, their efficiency honed by years of survival on planets that would have killed ordinary humans in minutes. The Korvath flagship took the first blow. Massive sections of its hull were shredded, revealing the alien soldiers inside, their screeches of fury muffled by the deafening roar of explosions. Small, her Korvath vessels tried to protect it, but the Deathworlders had anticipated every move. They struck in waves, never pausing, never wavering. Lyra saw the children hiding in the ruins of the northern quarter, their faces pressed to the ground as debris fell around them. Soldiers carried them to safety while sharpshooters picked off Korvath stragglers. The city, which had been a place of terror and despair, now felt alive with resistance. Every street became a symbol of defiance. every building a bastion of hope. The Deathworlder ground squads emerged from their landing crafts, moving like shadows across the city. Their exosuits glimmered under the fires of battle, and their weapons cut through Korvath soldiers with terrifying efficiency. They did not hesitate. They did not pause. They struck and moved, each kill precise, each maneuver calculated to protect the innocent. Lyra couldn't believe her eyes. These humans were unlike any she had ever seen. They were monsters to their enemies, angels to her people. They carried the air of inevitability, of survival at all costs, and it made her heart swell with gratitude and awe. The Korvath commanders tried to rally their troops, barking orders in shrill alien tones. But panic had taken root. Their ships were falling, their ground forces were collapsing, and their confidence, once absolute, was gone. The Deathworlders had shattered it in hours, proving that strength alone could not triumph over skill, courage, and determination. From the rooftops, Lyra observed a squad of Deathworlders clear a Korvath gun emplacement. They moved silently, efficiently, and when the aliens realized what had happened, it was already too late. The streets erupted in cheers, not loud, not careless, but cautious, trembling, and filled with relief. For the first time in weeks, Velkros's people allowed themselves to breathe. Jarek's fleet moved in synchronized patterns, cutting off the Korvath retreat. Every ship, every weapon, every crew member was a cog in a machine designed for one purpose: to save Velkros. The humans did not hesitate. They did not question the odds. They acted. And in that moment, Lyra realized that the galaxy had misunderstood humanity for far too long. These were not weak, negotiable creatures. These were warriors, forged by death itself, answering a call that no one else had dared to answer. Explosions lit the night sky like twin suns. The Korvath flagship broke apart, its pieces falling to the city below. Smaller ships tried to flee, but Deathworlder interceptors cut them down in seconds. The survivors of the Korvath ground forces began to scatter, their morale shattered beyond repair. Lyra's soldiers advanced with renewed strength, reclaiming the streets block by block. Civilians helped where they could, clearing rubble, assisting the wounded, and carrying messages. Hope, fragile yet real, spread through the city like wildfire. Velkros was alive, and it was no longer alone. The Deathworlders paused briefly only to assess the battlefield. They had no mercy for the Korvath, who continued to resist, but they protected civilians at all costs. Their methods were precise, their judgment unerring. They were the sharp edge of survival, and they had come for Velkros first. Lyra finally allowed herself to breathe. She sank to her knees amidst the ruins, tears mingling with soot on her cheeks. The Deathworlders were real. They had come. They had answered when the galaxy had looked away, and as she looked to the sky, streaked with fire and the lights of human ships, she whispered to herself, barely audible over the chaos, "We are saved, because they came." The battle was far from over. There would be more challenges, more losses, more fights to come, but in that moment Velkros had hope, and hope was stronger than any enemy. Somewhere in the stars, Captain Jarek observed the battlefield. "We will finish this," he said to his crew. "We came first. We will not stop until it is done." The Deathworlders were relentless, and the Korvath would learn in the most brutal way possible that no empire could survive the fury of humans forged by death and hardship. The air above Velkros smelled of fire and ozone. Smoke from destroyed buildings mixed with the acrid scent of alien fuel. The Korvath, once a seemingly unstoppable force, now moved in chaos. Their dreadnoughts burned, smaller ships spun out of control, and ground troops scattered like frightened insects. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the tide had turned. Commander Lyra Tan ran through the streets, her boots pounding against cracked concrete. Around her, Velkros soldiers pushed forward, firing at retreating Korvath soldiers inspired by the invincible humans above. Civilians stepped out of hiding, gathering supplies, helping the wounded, and carrying messages to defenders. Hope, fragile and bright, spread like wildfire. "Keep advancing," Lyra shouted. "Push them back. Protect the shelters." Her voice carried authority, born not of rank alone, but of courage forged in the fires of desperation. Soldiers obeyed, inspired by her determination. Above, Deathworlder ships executed a relentless assault. Plasma beams cut through the Korvath fleet with deadly accuracy. Fighters swarmed alien bombers, shredding wings and engines before the Korvath could respond. The flagship, Once the terror of Velcros had already been reduced to a burning husk drifting in orbit. Every move of the Deathworlders was calculated, precise, and unrelenting. Captain Jarek Hallow observed from his bridge, eyes narrowing. "Do not let them escape," he ordered calmly. "Corner them. End this before they regroup." His words were more than commands. They were a promise to Velcros, a promise that survival would be achieved at all costs. The Korvath, sensing defeat, attempted to regroup near the southern quarter. Their soldiers tried to consolidate behind barricades, desperately firing energy weapons at advancing Velcros troops. But even here, the Deathworlders struck with surgical precision. Exosuit squads dropped into streets from hovering crafts, cutting down alien forces with terrifying speed. Lyra saw a Korvath war machine lumbering toward a group of civilians hiding in a collapsed market. Without hesitation, she charged forward, firing her rifle with deadly accuracy. Behind her, soldiers covered her advance. The machine hesitated, confused by the unexpected resistance, before exploding in a shower of fire and metal. The civilians screamed, but then cheered as Lyra helped them to safety. Even the children hiding behind debris began to smile cautiously. They had seen the monsters above fight monsters below, and in that chaos they had found a reason to believe again. Velcros was alive. They were surviving. And the humans, the Deathworlders, had made it possible. On the rooftops, sharpshooters picked off Korvath snipers, guiding civilians to safer streets. Every soldier of Velcros now moved with a rhythm dictated by the Deathworlders, every move coordinated, every step purposeful. The Korvath could no longer act freely. Their strategy, once flawless, had collapsed. Panic had taken root. Jarek watched the alien flagship explode in orbit. Debris rained down like meteor showers, a brutal reminder that survival was not given. It was taken. He gave the next command with measured calm. "Finish clearing the city. Every Korvath in range is a target. Protect the civilians at all costs. Move." The Korvath tried to fight back, but morale had crumbled. Their ground troops faltered as the Deathworlders advanced, cutting them off from reinforcements. One by one, they were captured or eliminated. Entire alien units surrendered in disbelief, unable to comprehend the humans who moved like a single, unstoppable force. Lyra paused for a moment, catching her breath. She looked around at the streets she had fought through, at the civilians and soldiers alike. They were battered, broken, and terrified, but alive. Hope glimmered in their eyes again. And above them, the Deathworlders moved, silent predators ensuring the survival of everyone below. The Korvath flagship's destruction sent shockwaves through the remaining alien fleet. Panic spread, chaos reigned, and for the first time, Velcros felt the taste of freedom. Civilians cheered, soldiers fired with renewed courage, and even Lyra allowed herself a small, exhausted smile. A squad of Deathworlder ground forces entered the central plaza, their exosuits gleaming in the firelight. They moved with precision, securing the area and protecting civilians. Lyra approached them, awe evident on her face. One of the soldiers nodded, acknowledging her gratitude without words. That was the Deathworlders' way. Actions spoke louder than words, and today their actions had saved a world. The Korvath, now in full retreat, left Velcros with its pride shattered. Fires burned, smoke still rose, but the city was still standing. The people of Velcros had survived, and the Deathworlders had ensured it. Lyra walked through the streets, helping the wounded, comforting the frightened, and marking safe paths for civilians. For weeks she had fought despair as much as she had fought the Korvath. Now for the first time she felt a sense of victory. It was not complete, not without cost, but it was real. Above, Jarek watched the remaining alien ships flee. His expression was calm, unyielding, but there was a small flicker of satisfaction. Velcros had survived because they had come first. The galaxy had waited, hesitant and indecisive, while a world burned. But Deathworlders did not wait. They acted. They answered the call when no one else would. Lyra looked up at the sky streaked with fire and the lights of human ships. She whispered to herself, barely audible over the distant roar of explosions. "We are not alone. We are never alone." For Velcros, the turning tide was more than just a battle won. It was proof that even in the darkest hour, courage, determination, and the right allies could change ever. The Korvath would remember this day. The galaxy would remember. And the people of Velcros would never forget the humans. Deathworlders, who had answered their call first, were torn apart. Buildings reduced to rubble, and fires still smoldered in the distance. The Korvath had been defeated, their forces scattered or destroyed, but the cost of survival was written on every face. Commander Lyra Tan walked slowly through the city, her boots crunching on shattered concrete. The streets were filled with debris, broken vehicles, and the silent bodies of those who had fallen. Soldiers moved among the survivors, helping the wounded and clearing paths for families to escape to safer areas. Even in victory, the weight of loss was heavy. She paused at the ruins of a marketplace where children had huddled just days before. The area was charred and blackened, the remnants of the Korvath's assault still smoking. Tears filled her eyes as she knelt and touched a piece of scorched debris, remembering the terror that had gripped the children here. And yet amidst the devastation there were signs of life. Small hands clutched parents, animals emerged from hiding, and a few brave voices dared to speak words of gratitude and hope. The Deathworlders had not left. Their ground squads patrolled the streets, ensuring no Korvath survivors could regroup and threaten the civilians. They moved silently, efficiently, a presence both terrifying to enemies and reassuring to the people of Velkros. Their exosuits glinted under the dim sun, weapons lowered but ready, eyes scanning every alley and rooftop. They were soldiers of survival, guardians who acted before anyone else dared. Captain Jarek Hallow observed from orbit. The fleet had scattered to monitor the remnants of the Korvath, ensuring no regrouping could occur. His expression remained calm, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes. He knew the cost of war, how easily lives could be lost in a moment, and he respected the fragility of survival. His people, too, bore the scars of battle, though theirs were often internal, shaped by the harsh worlds they called home. On the streets, Velkros soldiers worked alongside Deathworlders. Civilians helped as well, removing rubble, tending to the injured, and marking safe routes. Lyra watched as a squad of Deathworlders cleared a collapsed bridge to allow a group of elderly citizens to cross. Their actions were silent and efficient, yet they radiated care. The people of Velkros began to understand that these were not just warriors, they were saviors. Despite the relief and gratitude, grief was unavoidable. Families mourned the loss of loved ones, soldiers counted their dead, and the city remembered the terror it had endured. Lyra herself felt the weight of every life lost, every child who had cried in fear, and every soldier who had fallen in battle. The victory was bitter, mingled with sorrow and exhaustion. Still, life demanded action. The survivors could not linger in despair. With the Deathworlders' guidance, Velkros began the painstaking process of rebuilding. Hospitals were set up in temporary structures. Water and food were distributed, and the children were brought together in safe spaces where laughter slowly returned. Soldiers repaired defenses, clearing streets and restoring order, while civilians planted gardens and repaired homes. Lyra stood at the center of the city, looking up at the massive shapes of the Deathworlder ships above. She whispered a silent thank you to the humans who had come first, who had acted when the rest of the galaxy waited. Without them, Velkros would have been nothing but ash and silence. With them there was hope, a fragile, brilliant hope. Some of the Korvath had survived hiding in the ruins or fleeing into space. The Deathworlders patrolled diligently, ensuring no threat could rise again. They treated the survivors with precision and fairness, neutralizing danger without unnecessary destruction. It was a lesson in discipline and purpose, one that Velkros's people watched with awe. Lyra's soldiers, too, had learned from the Deathworlders. They moved with more confidence, coordinated in their actions, and understood that courage was not just personal. It was contagious. Civilians picked up the lessons as well, learning to work together, to support each other, and to reclaim what the Korvath had tried to destroy. At night, as fires burned low and the stars emerged above the shattered city, Lyra walked among her people. She saw small moments of resilience, a child playing with a salvaged toy, a family sharing a meal in a partially repaired home, a soldier smiling as they helped a neighbor rebuild. These moments, small and fragile, were proof that survival was not just about winning battles, it was about living, even after the worst had happened. Above them, Jarek's fleet lingered. They would leave eventually, but not yet. Velkros was safe for now, and they would ensure it remained so. The Deathworlders did not seek glory, only survival and protection for those who could not defend themselves. In the quiet moments, Lyra realized that these humans had become more than allies. They had become symbols, proof that the galaxy still held beings capable of answering the desperate call when no one else would. The city slept uneasily that night, but with hope in its heart. Velcros had survived, battered but alive. The Korvath had been broken, the streets cleared, and the survivors were learning that life could continue even after unimaginable terror. And all of it had been made possible by humans from harsh worlds, who had answered first when the galaxy had remained silent. Lyra stood on the balcony once more, looking at the city below. She felt grief, yes, but also pride and hope. She knew that Velcros had endured because courage and determination had arrived in the form of Deathworlders. "We are alive," she whispered, "because they came first, and we will never forget it." Somewhere in the vastness of space, Captain Jarek Hallow and his crew watched over the planet. They did not boast. They did not celebrate. But in their hearts there was quiet satisfaction. They had fulfilled their duty, answered a call that no one else dared, and ensured that life had a chance to continue on Velcros. The battle had ended, but the story of survival had only just begun. And Velcros, scarred and battered, would carry the memory of the humans who had answered their desperate plea when all others waited, and waited too long. The first light of Velcros's sun cut through the smoke-filled skies, revealing a city scarred but alive. The ruins glimmered with gold and silver under the early morning rays, as if the planet itself was trying to heal after the nightmare. Fires still burned in small pockets, but the air now carried the quiet hum of life returning. Birds cautiously returned to their perches, and distant laughter from children echoed through the streets. Commander Lyra Tan walked slowly through the city, her boots crunching on rubble, her eyes scanning the faces of survivors. Soldiers, civilians, and children moved together, repairing what they could, sharing stories, and finding ways to rebuild hope. Every action, no matter how small, was a step toward reclaiming what had been lost. She paused at a makeshift memorial in the city square, where residents had gathered to honor those who had fallen. Candles flickered in the morning breeze, and the names of the brave were etched on stone. Lyra knelt and touched the monument, silently honoring the sacrifices made. Yet despite the grief, there was pride. Pride that they had survived, that they had endured, and that they had been saved by humans who had answered the call when no one else would. The Deathworlders had begun their departure, their massive ships rising into the sky in perfect formation. The people of Velcros watched silently, awestruck by the beings who had fought with such precision and courage. These humans were not ordinary. They had survived worlds that would have killed ordinary people, battled enemies without mercy, and yet protected the innocent above all. Captain Jarek Hallow stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the city below. His expression was unreadable, calm as always, yet there was a subtle softness in his eyes. Velcros had survived, and he knew it was because his people had acted first. He said nothing aloud. Words were unnecessary. The proof was below them, the survivors, the rebuilt hope, and the silence of a defeated enemy. As the fleet began to move away, a group of Velcro's children waved from a partially repaired plaza. Their eyes were wide, filled with wonder, gratitude, and something else, admiration. The Deathworlders acknowledged them with subtle gestures, a nod or a wave, then turned their attention to the vastness of space, ready to answer the next call wherever it might come. Lyra approached Captain Jarek's temporary landing team as they prepared to depart. She bowed her head slightly in respect. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "Velcros would not have survived without you. I don't know how to repay you." Jarek looked at her, his gaze steady. "You survive. That is payment enough," he said simply. "We act because someone must. Not for glory, not for reward, just because it is necessary." His words carried the weight of experience, of countless battles fought on harsh worlds where life was never guaranteed. The people of Velcros began to understand what kind of humans these were. They were not just warriors. They were guardians, symbols of courage that refused to wait for permission. They acted first. They acted decisively. They acted when no one else dared. In the days that followed, Velcros began the slow, arduous process of rebuilding. Homes were repaired, hospitals reopened, and children returned to schools. Soldiers worked with Deathworlder advisors, learning new tactics, coordination, and strategies that had saved their city. Lyra herself